Welcome back to Dukascopy TV. I'm Elaine Stenson, and today I'm joined in the studio by Geoffrey Hamilton, who's head of the Public-Private Partnerships Programme at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. So Geoffrey, we're hearing a lot of good things about public-private partnerships in terms of infrastructure and in terms of social services. But what are some of the challenges that you're finding yourself facing on an ongoing basis?
Well, the main challenge, Elaine, is governments and their lack of capability to do public-private partnerships. A lot of people talk about financing, but actually, in our view, the real problem is the capability and knowledge of governments to do public-private partnerships.
And what exactly do you mean by a lack of knowledge?
Well, to give you a good example, the United Nations office in Geneva was asked by the member states to explore the use of PPP for the renovation of the Palais des Nations. Now, Palais des Nations is an iconic building in Geneva, which was built in 1929 for 5 years, desperately in need of money. And the United Nations Office in Geneva was said, could it be done through a public-private partnership? Now, we helped them in this, but there was no model by which the UNOG could use to look at whether PPP was actually feasible. And it took many months before that report. Now, our office in Geneva is exactly in the same position as many governments do when they start embarking on public-private partnership. What is the model? What is the financing mechanism like? And so on. So that information is not publicly available and needs to be.
Okay. And are these partnerships going to contribute to development, or are they just, some might say that they're just a way of making money for these multinational companies?
Well, certainly it should be, in terms of what we are trying to do in developing international standards for public-private partnerships through the International Centre of Excellence. That's the objective of what we're trying to do. It should be partnerships for development, PPPs for development. That is, that it should be producing PPPs that actually help small businesses, that standards that can lower barriers to entry, because it allows companies, local companies, to get information that otherwise, because of their size, they wouldn't be able to do. So international standards are very commensurate, we would argue, with PPPs for development, and also making sure that there are responsible principles for financing, so that one of our principles of good governance in public-private partnerships, which the UNECE produced a few years ago, putting people first, is actually respected in these partnerships for development.
So Geoffrey, how can a single agency prepare the international practices like this?
Well, the simple answer is that it cannot by itself undertake such a very ambitious agenda as this. What we've done under the International Centre of Excellence is working with our international partners, World Bank, Asian Development, European Investment Bank. We've set up specialist centres focusing on specific topics. Their responsibility would be to gather materials, experiences, and develop best practices in that specific sector, and then transmit it to the UN to make it into standards. So that task is extremely important, and a number of countries have become very closely involved in setting up specialist centres. Philippines, for example, have set up a specialist centre on health. Russia has one. Morocco is probably going to set up one on renewable energy. Netherlands on water management. Azerbaijan on ICT. India on roads. So there's a lot of countries getting involved, and that's why it becomes feasible to be able to talk about global standards, because we've got so many governments willing to help us find out what best practice is.
And how does the UN fit into this, as they don't fund projects?
No, UN doesn't fund projects, but we have independence neutrality. We don't represent a single corporate interest or a government, so we have credibility as a neutral body.
And what are the challenges you face as being neutral and objective?
Well, not so much those challenges. It's more the specialist centres that we've set up under the International Centre of Excellence. It's trying to provide some administrative support to the specialist centres in order that they can do their task of identifying what has worked, what has not worked in public-private partnerships. So that's a challenge. And the other thing is, it's not just preparing the standards, finding out what the international standards are, it's helping governments to implement them. These standards are of really little value unless they're implemented. So we also have to make sure that the governments are helped to implement the standards that we can develop with our international partners, because this is not UN just starting from scratch. We have a huge cooperation with World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, European Investment Bank. All these financial institutions provide tremendous support for public-private partnerships. I think if you're looking at it in a kind of organisational sense, maybe we are upstream in the project where standards are being developed, and the international financial institutions are more downstream, actually at the financing stage.
Finally, is the International Centre of Excellence going to be bad news for the consultants helping governments with the partnerships?
Well, I better not say that we're certainly not going to put consultants out of business, but I absolutely think that developing standards will allow consultants to focus their work more in their support. I mean, consultants are critical to give experience, expertise to governments which lack it. That's absolutely clear. Maybe they're criticised a little bit for some things, but generally speaking, if you can focus their work so that they can adapt the standards for the national setting, so it's in tune with the cultural and institutional background, then you're making the job that the consultants do even better than it is now.
Geoffrey, thank you for that, and thanks for joining us today. And that's all we have time for now, but do check back later for further updates and interviews from the Dukascopy TV team. Bye for now.